Okay, welcome everybody. And today we're going to be talking about another personality which is sort of making the news. And that is somebody that, of course, we are already familiar with. And we are going to be able to talk about something that's happened recently, which has caused a lot of consternation, not only Pakistan, but in most of the Pakistani community the world over. Now, of course, I'm going to be talking about Imran Khan and Pakistan politics. Now, initially, when I had talked about Imran Khan, it was in the context of him being in power. He no longer is in power because in the last 10 days, he was, there was a conspiracy that enabled him to, that a no confidence vote ousted him in parliament. So he lost the government. And we'll go into that as to what's causing this to happen. So let me just very quickly tell you what our agenda is today. So we're going to be talking about the recent astonishing events in Pakistan. Now, this was most unexpected. But then what has been building up over the last 3.5, nearly 4 years of his governance was all the opposition was working very, very hard to try and oust him because he was pursuing a policy of bringing them to account. Because most of the people in previous governments for the last 30 years have been crooks and they have done enormous amount of damage and nobody was held accountable because the two parties were leagued together. And that brought about a situation with international help to sort of oust him. So that's, now, before I get into it, I just want you to sort of have a little idea about what the people actually think. Because all well and good for governments to do mischief one way or another, but the public is another thing. Now, the public reaction of this ouster has been phenomenal. And I'll show you a few clips to give you an idea as to what actually are the reactions in the country. So here we are. I've got, sorry. Now, as soon as he was ousted, he started to hold rallies. Within a day or two of his ouster, he held a rally, the first one in Peshawar, and you can see the attendance in that rally of his. It's enormously sort of, people are supporting him. They feel that he has been done in. So let's just watch for a few minutes. Now you can see the size of the crowd. The estimate was about 700,000. And that's through some of these, all these shiny things that you're seeing are mobiles who were told to sort of just flash their presence over there. And Google or whoever monitors these sort of things was able to say there was, this number of exchanging take place from the people. Now, another clip I want to show you is this one where Imran Khan has been so popular that there have been hundreds of songs created during his, before the election and during the election. So you can see he's become more popular than a pop idol. And people have really sort of written songs, and that has brought about a community in that young crowd who has become aware of what he's actually talking about. And his basic message is to be able to make Pakistan independent. because this is the big sort of message. Independent in the sense of not only having to do their economics and all these strategies and defense policies and so on, but in foreign policy as well. Now, the internal structure of Pakistan has been, quite heavily militarized. I mean, they have been at the back of civil governments, so they have been toppled, and they have, martial law has been declared a few times. You might have heard of General Ayub, General Musharraf, and so on. Anyhow, the relationship between the military and the civil has always been very precarious. But at the end of the day, the people who really called the shots were the army. So when he came in and started to sort of pass the message on, saying, look, we need to be independent. And he was not just talking about independent foreign policy in terms of relations with countries, but independence in being able to not have these local forces also controlling the civilian government. So indirectly, he was sort of giving out a message saying, we need to get rid of both of these types of influences, which have been very detrimental to the country. So let me just put a little bit of flavor to the sound. Now, you can see that's a song that's sung in Hindi. Here's another one that you can listen to. Now, these songs exemplify this emotion and the connection they have with Imran Khan. There was a time during his tenure of 4 years, prices had gone up as the world over, and then COVID as well. So the opposition was gaining ground. But the moment, they started to work against him in terms of asserting himself as an independent country, even in formulating their foreign policy, then the foreign powers started to take note, and in particular, USA. So when he made the trip to Ukraine, on the day when Russia actually marched into Ukraine, that was the turning point for USA, because USA says you should not have gone, should have canceled the trip. And furthermore, you have not sort of condemned Russia. And so the European Union message as well saying, please condemn Russia. He said, no, I'm not going to condemn Russia unless you condemn what's happening in Kashmir. Because you keep quiet when it suits you, when India is a big market, and therefore you have to sort of toe their line. But when it comes to Pakistan, you just treat us as if we are your slaves. So that language got everybody riled up. And then, of course, the foreign powers started to collude with the local opposition. So the local opposition came together and started to sort of put this motion up. So a lot of money, a lot of horse trading started to take place and so on. And this is what I'm going to be talking about as we move on. So what we have is really a big issue regarding Imran Khan, concerned with his independent thinking. So his ouster took place just recently here, 9th of April. And then the regime, let me make this a little bit bigger. So, okay. So regime change became the word for bringing him down. And of course, USA has a lot of experience in regime changes. They have done it about 40 times before in history, as one can sort of see. And because, the model that USA has been following is that, that there are about 800 bases all over the world. And one of the things that they requested after the exit from Afghanistan by USA was they wanted a base in Pakistan so that they can sort of, send the drones and, do bombing and all that. And Imran Khan said, absolutely not. That became the key word for America to start sort of putting the pressure on. And the thing that happened very quickly after that, after his visit to Ukraine, or to Russia rather, was that you had the Under-Secretary of State. He held a meeting with the ambassador of Pakistan in Washington, and very clearly told him that if Imran Khan is not removed, Pakistan will will face a lot of severe issues in the future. But if he's removed, all will be forgiven. But if he remains in power, then Pakistan will have to face a lot of hardship. So that was documented and then presented to Pakistan as a document, which then went through the security sort of agency. Everybody in power saw this and found that to be a genuine type of document. And of course, immediately after that document was produced, the motion of no confidence was instituted in Parliament, and about each of the members of Parliament who wanted to vote against Pakistan, against Imran Khan, were bribed to the extent of $1 million each. This is all documented. This is all very proven. And when the issue came about concerned with the motion in Parliament, then the speaker, who was the Imran Khan's party speaker, deputy speaker, he didn't allow the motion. And immediately what happened then was that the Supreme Court, they sort of took exception to that and said, and they opened the courts in the middle of the night practically and said, and they were waiting to see if that vote was going to take place or not. And of course, the vote did take place because the Supreme had ordered it to be taken place. And that's when he was, ousted. So you can see the complexity, the complicity that took place between the powers that be, including the army, the legal, the courts as well, including the Supreme Court, would you believe? And then the opposition, who are all mafia and criminalized because they're part of the Panama Papers and all that, with billions of dollars stolen from the country. This was the gang that has come in now after the ouster. So you can see it's unbelievable type of politics taking place by the international powers that be, who are blatantly using their power to bring down weaker governments. And I'm glad to say that China made a strong statement. China said that USA has got to stop doing this because he says in Asia, we will not permit this to happen. Mark the words, permit. And I was very glad to hear that because, with the 70 years of the past history, we have seen 40 countries' regimes have changed, an endless amount of wars in the Middle East, North Africa, Afghanistan, Yemen, the world over. So who's causing this? Of course, blame is put on the other always, Vietnam, of course. Then, first it was the communists, then it was Islam, then it was terrorism. So somebody or the other is held accountable as being responsible. So the strategy that USA and in general the West is following is, which we don't hear too much about because the media doesn't report it. It's all done as in the name of diplomacy. And unfortunately, the budgets, if you see US budget, with just the CI alone amounts to hundreds of billions of millions of dollars for covert operation. And one of the reasons why Julian Assange is sitting in jail here is because, UK being the right-hand government of USA keeps him in jail. Complete and utter type of disrespect for international law, really. So, okay, let's get back to this immediate thing. So, Imran Khan's ouster rocks Pakistan, happened on the 9th, which last week. So, the opposition wins no confidence in parliament. And who are the people who brought that about? Local and foreign entities. So, all local opposition parties backed by USA. Now, one of the things about the USA is that after the smarting and exit of Afghanistan, from Afghanistan, it felt very let down by Pakistan, because Pakistan has been always saying, look, there's no military solution in Afghanistan. You've got to sit down and talk and bring about some sort of government which is supported by the people. But USA, I think, makes decisions which I think sometimes are very hard to understand. So anyhow, that following the defeat, and then Ukraine and Imran Khan's assertion of independent foreign policy, and also taking the lead in OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Countries, trying to be able to bring about the issues of Muslims to the world table, didn't, of course, make him popular with USA, especially when he went over to the UN and talked about it. I'll talk about it a little bit more as we go along. So what happened was that the USA united the opposition together, put in some money, and brought about that no confidence motion. And then with the complicity of the courts and the army, he was ousted. You can see that. Now, so here we are. Imran Khan own party members were offered $1 billion each to vote with the opposition, which they did, about 20 of them. So here, main reason for IK dismissal is the assertion of independent foreign policy. But along with that, there is the other one, which is probably a bit more important as well. Now, India is the lifelong enemy of Pakistan. And now that USA and India have got together to try and face China in what they call Quad, the Quad includes Australia and Japan as well. They have, in fact, an ally in India, and together they have colluded to try and bring about the fall of Imran Khan, who they found to be doing a lot of good to the country, because the exports were increasing. They were making a lot of progress with working closely with China and building up that infrastructure, which I have talked about many times before, and many other positive things that were happening in Pakistan. That was not to the liking of India. And of course, when China sort of started to have border dispute with India, India became much more towards USA, and therefore colluded with USA to bring up down Imran Khan. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show you here is that, see, Imran Khan, when he was ousted, he had worldwide support. These are people, these are crowds which are all over the world, in every country where Pakistanis are, they got together. And of course, I was one of them yesterday in Hyde Park. You can see me on Sunday. There was a big crowd. And of course, I went from the Hyde Park corner to Evan Field, which is next to the Park Lane, where Nawaz Sharif, the biggest gangster, who was in Panama Papers as well, who has a flat there. So the whole crowd gathered there. Some of the shots that I've seen, say hundreds, thousands of people were there. Now, here is one of the crowds one of his rallies. These rallies have taken place only in the last 10 days. And the next one is going to be in Lahore, which is tomorrow. And they expect the crowds to be larger than this. And a lot of people have been interviewed. Now, what is astonishing is, which I haven't seen happen in my lifetime, is that people have not come on the time that it was scheduled, which is tomorrow. People are already gathering today. And some even came yesterday from all over the country. So you can see the enthusiasm that the people are showing for Imran Khan. And this was the big miscalculation on the part of those people who organized this conspiracy to oust him. Because they thought by just simply oust him, they can bring in the mafia in, change all the heads of institution, get rid of their pending cases. 24 of the 31 in the cabinet, they have court cases in them. They're out on bail. Have you heard of this sort of nonsense, that has taken place in any country? It's hard to believe. So you can see the anger of the people. Now, let's see. Now, what is he talking about? Why has the public supported him? And why is the world afraid of Pakistan? Because Pakistan, under Imran Khan, started to talk the language of Quaid-e-Azam, which is the founder of the country, who said, we want to be an independent nation and we don't want to take, yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir, from anybody. And we will follow an Islamic type of welfare state. He says, which is similar to what you have out in Europe, where, even animals are looked at kindly. This is what he talks about very openly. And here in Pakistan, we have even people who are, ignored to such an extent that it shames Islam to be able to sort of say that this is an Islamic country. So he's talking about the society's well-being. So this message started to sort of, appeal to the public, but not to the enemies of Pakistan, because they knew that Pakistan being an Islamic, a nuclear power, with under his leadership, the whole Muslim world can come together. That is 57 countries of the world, or Islamic countries, majority countries. And he has started to sort of, take on that role. And you can see it can be a very substantive type of power once it starts to sort of get organized. Before this, the leadership was with the Saudi Arabians. And Saudi Arabians, they are completely under the thumb of USA. We know that. And we see that because they're dependent on their sales of arms and oil and so on and so forth. I think we know that story. So now, how did he start to sort of take on the leadership of this Muslim, first of all, Pakistan, and then of the Muslim world? He raised these big issues in the General Assembly, UN. He raised the issue of climate, Kashmir, Islamophobia, and money laundering. And his message basically is, as I'll keep going down. So on the climate, he says, he's already planted 1 billion trees. He says, I support this. This is the future for us. We need to do something with the climate. Otherwise, there's no future for the whole world. And he wants to plant in 10 billion trees in the whole country now that he's become prime minister. So again, a very, very good message and appeals to the public. And he, of course, got all the schools, participating in planting and so on. So big sort of movement has started to plant trees in Pakistan. So this is basically saying that his plans are there and he's making good progress on that. And also he wants to bring in, since the creation of Pakistan 70 years ago, just a handful of dams have been built. Whereas in the same time, India has built something like 3,000 dams. So the water situation in Pakistan is very crucial. And because of that, the hydro energy problem is there. So he says we need to do something about climate and about our dams. So he has undertaken the building of 10 dams, and he calls it the decade of dams. So he's taking all the right decisions. Now, this is at the UN, he's talking about Kashmir. Now, in Kashmir, what has been happening is that India has marched in last a year ago, because Kashmir had a special status in India, and that was built into the constitution. But when this current Modi government came in, and Modi government is synonymous with the Nazi government in Germany, because they believe in the supremacy of Hindus and so on, and they're targeting all the minorities. So they want to change the status of Kashmir, and they've got about 900,000 troops there, and have been under lockdown for a year. So, but yet there is nothing spoken about Kashmir in the Western world, because India has successfully sort of kept the matter out. So he says we need to sort of talk openly about what is going on in Kashmir. Abuse is taking place. People are being killed. 100,000 people have been killed, and yet there is no sort of coverage of the press. So you can see the bias of the Western press over in the world. So here it is, under lockdown, 7 million residents facing complete communication blackout, and then 4,000 people arrested, and jails are full, and yet we don't hear too much about it. See? So one of the issues, of course, that USA worries about is, because they want India to be friendly with them, they're saying, let's keep this matter of Kashmir, sweep it under the carpet. And of course, when Imran Khan started to bring it to the world's attention, that didn't go down well with USA and with India, their ally. So the next thing is about Islamophobia. Now, the world over, for Muslims, the Prophet is a very important person. And of course, they follow their religion fairly closely. And any abuse that takes place towards his person, towards the Prophet, like cartoons and so on, under the name of freedom of expression, he says is all wrong. Why can't you then talk openly about the Holocaust, he says, and not be penalized, if you deny the Holocaust and so on. So when a matter like that gets penalized, yet a big matter like Islamophobia, nobody takes any notice of it. So he has raised the issue to the general level, and of course the Secretary General has taken note of that, and March the 15th has been declared Anti-Islamophobia Day, which I think is one of the biggest achievements, which he then has presented to the Muslim world and say, look, finally I've talked to the world, and the world is going to sort of try and help the Muslims not have their religion insulted and demonized. So big achievement. Here it is, all these protests against Islamophobia. Now, money laundering. He has also sort of done a lot towards curtailing money laundering. If you know what money laundering, it is essentially taking black money and whitewashing it. And black money is really stolen money, tax avoidance and all that type of money. And the people in power, especially the current people who have come into power, both the parties, the People Party and the Muslim League Noon Party, which is the Nawaz party, they have taken turns in looting the country without hesitation, and they have looted billions of dollars worth. These are people who have no qualms whatsoever. So it's not hard to understand the anger of the people. And furthermore, Imran Khan says poor countries are not poor because they don't have resources. It's because the leadership steals their money and puts it out in the West. Now, the West is also dragging its feet on trying to do something about money laundering, because all that money comes here and keeps, the city of London and all those people putting it into tax shelters and all that. It's a business for these entities. Whereas if you talk about drug finance and terrorist finance, there's a lot more stricter laws. But plain money laundering, which is white collar crime, the West drags its heels on. Now, these are the people, the current people in power. His brother is in power, and this fellow here is the one whose flat behind Park Lane we went protesting. He's here with his two sons, still in hiding, as it were, but conspiring, with the West to try and topple Imran Khan. And now he wants to sort of come back to Pakistan uh, and then absolve himself from all these cases, because the way they do it is that they change the heads of all the institution and they then get rid of all the cases against them. So this is why they've come into power, and they hope to sort of try and come back into politics again, God forbid. Now, Bhutto, Benazir Bhutto's husband, Zardari, he's the guy in power at the moment, and his son, biggest crooks. I've met this guy, when I was staying in Pakistan for a few years, doing a project. Met him in one of the parties. At that time, he was not in power, but he seemed to me to be a terribly shrewd guy, but not at all what I would call rich, because his father had a cinema house, and he used to sell tickets in the pavement. Today, when he married Benazir Bhutto, he started to accumulate. He was known as Mr. 10%, and then he became Mr. 80%, I think. He accumulated 34 sugar mills, and he owns a Portman sort of hotel here in Baker Street, billions of dollars worth. So this is all looted money. And yet, these people have been supported by the West, which is astonishing disgrace, because the media doesn't cover it here, and therefore the West governments get away with it. Now, what has Imran Khan done in the 3 or 4 years that he's been there, which has made people really love him enormously? He has brought in lots of measures. First and foremost is the accountability. He says, in no way I'm going to let off anybody who's crooked and who has stolen money. And this is one of the reasons why the whole mafia gang who's in power now are saying, well, we've got cases below. 24 of the cabinet of 31 are out on bail. So they're trying very hard to get rid of all the cases and then start looting the country again. So accountability is one of his thing there. On the economy, he says the overseas Pakistanis, who number about 9 million or even more, I think 9 million, they are the people who send in remittances and are keeping Pakistan afloat with the money that they send. Because of the looting that has taken place, Pakistan has become very poor, except for people who are abroad who are maintaining their families away. The other thing, of course, he has done is come closer to China. Because of the historical things since the time of Kissinger, Pakistan has been instrumental in bringing USA to China. And since then, Pakistan has maintained very good relations with China. And they have enormous amount of projects working. And they're part of this Belt and Road initiative. I've talked about this a lot, where we're talking about Belt and Road initiative, which is basically the infrastructure of railways and roadways, highways, energy, dams, ports, whatever. So they are part of that big project of China, and they're doing well at that. And of course, he has brought in specific poverty alleviation program, which means that he's been able to sort of target the very poor people and bring them some type of welfare. Because this lady here has been very instrumental in initiating that program, and a lot of poor women and poor families are benefiting from that. A bit like a welfare type of support. He also wants to develop, the tourism, because he says, Pakistan has tremendous possibility. On the social front, he's sort of trying to bring in the communities which are on the fringe, like the LBGT and all that, into the fold. So really openly making an effort. And this is again sustenance for the poor women. Again, another program. Yeah, this is how it works. Basically, once you've got your ID card, you can go to the bank and start claiming that. He's initiated youth programs where the unemployed youth can get trained and they can borrow money and start little businesses. So he's done, I think, youth programs. Yeah, immensely popular. And of course, one of the things is self-employment as well. We're giving them loans. And then housing scheme as well. He has said, look, we start giving loans to people who are able to sort of put down a little bit of a deposit, a bit like a mortgage, and be able to build their little houses. So he's also initiated that. And the biggest one, he has initiated the health card. He has started to give to the whole, in every individual family, there's something like $10,000 worth of medical help. They can go to any hospital or clinic and avail that. So that has been also extended to all the Pakistan, and it will cover the whole country before long. Health card scheme, very, very popular with everyone. So you can see, and then of course he also built shelters for the people who had no shelter, who were sleeping on the roads and so on. He built these shelters and they're given food there. Now, one of the things that this government, this mafia government that came in, they closed these immediately and started to entertain in the Prime Minister's house big type of parties, which is astonishing that, you can have such a big discrepancy. But these government are not afraid of anything because they know that the army has been supporting them, the courts are supporting them, and of course the foreign powers are supporting them, which is a disgrace. And therefore, I'm ashamed to say that even UK doesn't raise its voice against all these kind of practices that are taking place. Okay, I'll stop here now and ask some questions if you have any.
Shafiq.
Yeah.
Hi. I was wondering whether I could sort of add something here about Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of similarities and differences between the two countries. What is happening in Sri Lanka now is a lot of upheaval, and there are lots of demonstrations against the ruling party. Now, the difference with our the ruling party in Sri Lanka is that they're totally corrupt. The president, prime minister, all the top politicians all belong to one family. And everybody knows they're totally corrupt. And in fact, the president was a US citizen when he applied to run the elections, which is totally against the law. So one of the placards they hold up is "Go home," which means go back to America. So the influence of the US has become a concern in Sri Lanka. And this conspiracy theory is sort of ridiculed in the West. We talk about it in England. They think, oh, it's just one of those conspiracy theories. But I think when you look at the way US has interfered with South America, Middle East, etc., they do have a way of trying to influence regime change. So there is a real concern about the US and the way they behave. So they're not conspiracy theories, there's a real fear. Now, US has not been interested in Sri Lanka over the last decades or so because they were in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. I think Britain gave them the right to set up their they've got an establishment there, but that is contested territory now. And I think they have been asked to leave because they had no right to ask the inhabitants to leave. So about a couple of years ago, the US did visit Sri Lanka, and there's again an interest in Sri Lanka because it's so strategically placed. The other sort of common ground here is the fact that Sri Lanka has been very friendly with China, and so has Pakistan. And China helped actually built a port in the south of Sri Lanka. And I don't know what the strings attached were, but at the moment, China actually run that port. So that is right, very strategic in the south of Sri Lanka. They have been given a 99-year lease. So it's run by the Chinese. There are no Sri Lankans. So there is that other thread, which I think the US is beginning to take some interest in. I just thought I'd point this out, that Sri Lanka is in a sort of
very important what you sort of mentioned here, because Sri Lanka is part of what is called the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. And
yes.
the routes around Sri Lanka carry all the oil to China from the Middle East.
Yep.
So it's very, very strategic location. And what China wants to do is to be able to ensure that there is facilities in Sri Lanka to be able to at least carry on their own way. So they built an airport and they built a port as well. But then what happened was that when COVID came in, Sri Lankan economy went down because the tourism was the biggest earner for Sri Lanka. So when those funds dried up, they couldn't manage, at least during the COVID period. But even before that, when that port was made, the estimate of business that they would get on the port didn't come through because of whatever management issues there were. So in a way, what China does in this particular case is they cover themselves by saying, we'll build it for you, but you operate it. And if you're not earning from it, then we will take control of it and run it so that, there is, we get our return back. So that is why the port, I think, has been taken. And I think Sri Lanka needs help. And I think IMF is going to step in and do something about it, because this Raja Waksha, that it's like a family concern in the ruling party. So yeah, that is again showing really these weak governments, need to have some good people leading them. And this current sort of leadership in Sri Lanka also is very bad. And now Pakistan is also having a very bad government. And Imran Khan was the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel, as it were. And he has been ousted. So which is a grave, big shame. But what is going to be happening is, sorry, go ahead, Robin.
Oh, I was going to change the subject slightly and ask you how has China reacted to the recent events of ousting Imran Khan?
Yeah, well, when the Olympics took place recently, Imran Khan went over to China, the Winter Olympics. And also Russia was there. So that sort of didn't look well from to the West, this support for China. But Imran Khan has worked very closely with China and has a number of projects underway in Pakistan on infrastructure. And China has said, they gave a clear warning to USA, saying that we will not permit, interesting phrase, we will not permit USA to bring about these types of regime changes in Asia. Because now, you see, China is getting strong enough to be able to sort of say to others, saying, okay, fine, we mind our own business to a large extent. We keep, helping where we can. But the moment we see in our own backyard, attempts to try and derail countries. And of course, we are going to sort of take some measures. So they are very much behind Pakistan. And also the reason why Imran Khan went to Russia, you see, Imran Khan met Putin at Beijing during the Winter Olympics. And he was invited to come over to Moscow. So he made that planned trip. Unfortunately, on the day that he landed, Russia invaded Ukraine. So that was a bit unfortunate. But nevertheless, what he had gone there was to try and get, for Pakistan, 30% discounted oil, and on oil and wheat as well. And also from some support, technical support on gas. See, he wanted a gas pipeline to come to Pakistan. So he had economic sort of visions of cooperation with Russia. So when the Ukraine thing happened, he didn't want to necessarily start condemning Russia straight away. He said, no, I won't condemn Russia. I'll be neutral, like India. India was also neutral. They didn't make a statement against that invasion. They said there must be a dialogue to settle the issue, which is what exactly Imran Khan also said said, we want you to conduct a dialogue and settle this issue. But Pakistan was targeted very heavily by both Europe and by USA, and no action was taken for a similar stance by India. So you can see the duplicity that was taking place in the foreign policies of these countries. So this is why the people know the story, and they're coming so strongly behind Imran Khan and saying, we don't want to be the slaves of the West. We don't want to say yes, yes, 3 bags full all the time. We want to be able to maintain the interest. Because they said, when we got into the war, this terrorism war in Afghanistan, when USA asked them at that time, General Musharraf to get in, Musharraf in his book, I think he also says that USA threatened Musharraf saying, we will bomb your country to storage if you don't join us. So he said we had no choice but to join in this war of USA in Afghanistan. And because of that, he says Pakistan has lost 80,000 people and $100 billion worth of business. So you can see the loss to Pakistan, which has been the greatest to any of the frontline countries. And you can see why Imran Khan is then saying, we want to sort of not go to war with anybody. We just want to have peace with everybody and have policy that we can, in fact, be in the interest of Pakistan. But what has happened is, of course, the previous governments have been forced into supporting US policies, which, as somebody says, this Ukraine war, USA will fight until the last Ukrainian. Because USA is not going to fight its wars on its own territory. It wants other countries to fight their wars for them, So a real eye-opener for a lot of public that is coming up in this ouster of Imran Khan. And that's why there is such strong feeling in the country to bring him back. So when elections were to take place, he's going to sweep, completely. But it remains to be seen whether they will hold the election or whether they'll do all the jiggery pokery to try and discredit him and oust him and all, get him legally disqualified one way or another. So, this mafia gang is there with a clean sort of open book to try and do whatever mischief they can. And I really feel sorry for Pakistan. But I'm very heartened by this Imran Khan, the stance he's taken. And tomorrow is the day, which is going to be also very, very sort of crucial. Okay, anybody else has any questions? Because I went through that very fast. This recording is there. So on my archive, you can also watch this. Okay. Okay, Malalia.
Shafiq, can I get back to this question that Robin asked about China? It's sort of curious that China has not wanted to step in politically in any country so far. So it seems to have, of course, they don't say much, but it looks as if that is their stance at the moment. They don't like to interfere politically. You know, they have the trade agreements, but certainly in Sri Lanka, everyone says, well, one thing they know about China is they don't seem to want to get involved politically with local politics.
Yeah.
So how far that will continue? Certainly within Pakistan, might be pressured into doing something if the whole thing turns, and I don't know.
I think in Pakistan, the question will be the support of the public, of the people.
Right.
So enormous in the case of Imran Khan, that this will continue and will make the difference. Even the powers that be, the army and the courts, are seeing this, and they will have to sort of adjust their thinking on it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I see it's crystal clear. Okay, say goodbye. Thank you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
We'll talk
Shafiq.
about China next on my next talk, which is the
Right.
last talk. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah. Bye.
bye now.